turn it over to you.
Great. Hello, everyone. This is Dahlia Shaewitz. I'm with the American Institutes for Research and also the project director for the Open Educational Resources to Support Adult Ed Teaching and Learning Project. That's a mouthful. It is funded by OCTE, and I'm very pleased to welcome everyone to this webinar. It's actually the last webinar for our three-year project, which is wrapping up at the end of this month. I want to mention that the project has conducted a number of activities over the past 3 years that have been very much involved working with teachers, adult educators. And we've worked with those teachers throughout the project to learn about OER, to use OER, share them, and to evaluate them. And today we're going to focus in this webinar on that evaluation piece. We had a great online conversation the past week. We'll talk a little bit about that later in the webinar. But my first impression was that there's just been a tremendous growth in understanding of what open educational resources are, and certainly a growing interest in using, sharing, and evaluating them. So thank you to everyone who either participated in that online conversation or simply lurked and learned. We encourage you to access all of the resources that you can find on the OER STEM project page, which is on the links community site, and we will have links courses. That is one of the objectives of this project, was to develop online courses on open educational resources for math and science. Those courses will be available through the links learning portal. Training will be offered through state organized training and the links RPDCs. Our project, as I mentioned, ends in June, and I just wanted to say that we've learned so much thanks to our friends and colleagues in the field. I'm very pleased with the growth and interest in OER, and I hope that everyone on this call and beyond will continue to use OER, share them, modify them, create new ones, use them with your learners, have your learners create them, share them online, and that the evaluation piece will continue. So with that said, I'm going to ask my co-presenters to introduce themselves as well.
Hi everyone, this is Amanda Duffy, and I'll be speaking with you this afternoon about evaluating and what OER are. I've been on the project for about 2.5 years, and I've had the great fortune of working with many of the teachers, so I'm looking forward to this afternoon.
Hello everyone, this is Tara Myers. So I've been with the project from the beginning, and as a social scientist, mostly what I focus on in my career is measurement. That's just tool development, validation, and implementation. So the main role I've played on this project, and the main role I'm going to play on the webinar today, is focused on the evaluation of OER. So I really appreciate your time today.
Great, thank you both. So by way of introducing everyone on the call, instead of everyone saying hello, I'd like to ask by a show of hands, and there are ways to raise your hands. By a show of hands, how many of you are math teachers? 1, 2, few. Several, great. All right, great. And I know some of you wear multiple hats, so if you'll unraise your hand and then let me know how many of you are science teachers. Some overlap actually with our math teachers, that makes sense. Great, and you can lower your hands, and how many of you, by a show of hands, are ESL teachers? A good number also. And then finally, by a show of hands, how many of you are professional developers and provide training? Okay, quite a number. Great. Final question, how many of you are program administrators? Also a good number. Wonderful. Thank you all. Why did I ask your roles? Because I wanted to make sure you understood that this webinar is definitely for you. Whether you're an instructor, a professional developer, regardless of your content area, and as a program administrator, this is really going to help you understand evaluating OER, and we will talk a lot about OER. So I will turn it over now to Amanda Duffy.
Thanks, Dahlia. So the purpose of our webinar today is to discuss the value of evaluating open educational resources and to train on the use of specifically the Achieve Rubrics, which is housed on OER Commons, to evaluate the OER. Some of the highlights of our session today will include learning how to tag OER so that way your evaluations can be shared more easily and identified more easily by other adult education teachers. We'll talk about adding comments and joining the OER Commons public group of adult educators where you can, again, share your resources in a single place. And although the focus of this project has been on math and science OER, all potential OER users will benefit from this online event, as Dahlia just mentioned. So for a few days, we had a discussion on links. And we started the conversation with a basic question of what is the value of evaluating? And do you evaluate outside of your educational responsibilities on sites such as Amazon or any other site where you can purchase and rate something? And you all had quite a bit of really thoughtful comments that you shared with us. And some of the highlights from that conversation was that in order to keep the evaluation of open educational resources going and to get the field engaged in this process is that we really need a simple evaluation tool. And beyond having this simple tool, we need to insert OER into other PD initiatives. So that's to say that it can't be separate. We have to really talk about and highlight and share how OER can support other initiatives such as TEAL or STAR or ANI. As always, which I think is something that all of us on the call are not surprised by, but lack of time is always a challenge for adult educators. So this ties back again to needing this simple evaluation tool. And also there was a lot of conversation about the benefits that OER have for not only teachers but also for the learners, which is really key because this is what we want to happen. We want teachers to benefit, and then of course we want our students to benefit as well. So I just want to take you through a couple minutes, make sure that we are all on the same page about what open educational resources are and what their value are. So education is really a matter of sharing. And the open educational resources approach is designed specifically to enable this efficient and affordable sharing. OER also allow the full power of the internet to be brought into education. Now this is true whether you have a technologically advanced classroom or you have minimal to zero technology in your classroom, because OER can not only be used online, but they can also be downloaded and printed out. And through the internet, there's a seamless sharing of resources with other people, not only in your program, your state, but worldwide. Who's developing resources and who's sharing them? If they're sharing them on OER Commons or a similar repository with an open license, you have access to their creativity and their engaging teaching methods. OER provide teachers with free and legal permissions to engage in continuous quality improvement processes, and we'll talk about this in just a minute, but one of the values of OER is that you can modify them because of their licenses. So not only are we sharing, but we're constantly improving on one another's work. And in the addition to the power of sharing, there are also options for you to evaluate OER. And again, this is where we'll focus most of our energy today. And these evaluations can really enhance teacher and learning experiences and contribute to the participation in an open community and in deeper learning opportunities for students. So according to the National Educational Technology Plan, OER are teaching, learning, and research resources that reside in the public domain or have been released under an intellectual property license. And that means that they can be found online, that they have a specific license that allows users to share freely, to access freely, and repurpose. And that includes revising and resharing. Another way to conceptualize or think about OER is through the 5 Rs, and we call this the 5 R framework. And this can help users determine if a resource is open, that it will meet all of these criteria. So the first one is reuse. This means, exactly as it says, that you have the right to reuse the content, whether that be in your classroom or in a professional development setting. It means you can not only reuse it, but also redistribute it, the second R. This means that you can make copies, you can link on websites, and you can share the content with others. The really fun stuff comes into play when we talk about remixing and revising. Oftentimes, resources that we find online are geared towards K through 12 learners, and the images, the text, the language, the context in which they're developed may not be appropriate for our adult learners. If the resource is open, that means you can go ahead and revise that content so it is appropriate for your learners, and then remix it or combine it with another resource to create something new. And then finally, retain. This means that you have the right to make, own, and control copies of the content. So if you create an OER and share it, and you give permissions for others to modify it, your original work will not be changed. It will exist always as you shared it. There may be multiple versions out there, but that won't have your name on it. Your original OER will be as it is. So some examples of OER. OER can come in a variety of forms. They can be podcasts, they can be online simulations or games, they can be textbooks to full curriculums, to apps, to lesson plans, to simple one-time activities. So when you're considering the use of OER and evaluating them, it's really important to remember that you can evaluate all of these items. It doesn't have to be something grand or large. It can be something that's very simple, but it's still open, so you can evaluate it on OER Commons. I just want to take just a moment to really create the distinction between free and open. And that the value in open educational resources is the permissions to reuse, redistribute, revise, and remix, those 5 Rs that we just talked about. So a free resource may have limited use, and you would have to read the fine print or the terms of use to be aware of that. But they may have restrictions such as if you work for a for-profit, you're not allowed to share it, or you can only make X amount of copies, whereas an open resource has unrestricted use. Free and open are both no cost to access. For free resources, permission may be needed to reuse or redistribute, even to make copies for a professional development training. And for open, you do not need those permissions because the license that they have attached to them lets you know right away that you are in fact allowed to reuse, redistribute, share, adopt, or modify, and you don't need permission because the license already grants that to you. And we put some examples that you may be familiar with that are free or open. And I just also want to make sure that I clarify and say that free is not bad. There are many wonderful free resources out there. With the open resources, the added value really comes in this ability to adapt and modify and share those resources. So as a creator of OER, you can license your work in any way that states your permissions for use for all other users. The most common form of these licenses are Creative Commons licenses. And if you continue to engage in use of OER and remixing and revising and sharing, it's important that you're aware how each license works differently. And I just wanted to share just a couple of very common licenses with you. Again, we're not going to spend a lot of time in this session to get familiar with them, but you can go to creativecommons.org and learn all about the licenses. So some of the permissions excuse me, included in these licenses are attribution. So again, I can revise your original OER and then share my revisions as long as I say Dahlia is the original creator. Share alike means that I can share my revised work as long as I put it under the same license. So I want to make sure that everyone has the ability to revise or remix that work under the appropriate license. And then finally, non-commercial. There are some licenses that allow users to take work and use it commercially, but there is a specific condition in which you cannot do that. So that was a very quick overview of OER and licensing and values and how it's connected to evaluation. So before we move on, does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask? You can use the chat pod. No? Okay, as questions come up, please feel free to use the chat and we'll respond. So I'd like to ask you now by show of hands, so if you can raise your hands, how many of you are a member of the Adult Education Open Community of Resources on OER Commons? All right, fantastic. I see a few hands. So hopefully by tomorrow there'll be a lot more hands going up. Thank you. So you may say, okay, this webinar is about evaluating OER, so why are we talking about an OER Commons public group? And the reason why I want to share this with you now is so that you really have a broader context for the value of evaluating OER. This OER Commons public group is for adult educators, and it's a place that you can, again, join freely and where you can share your evaluations and look at evaluations completed by other adult educators. This is just a screenshot of the home page, and we have multiple folders that you can save your resources in, such as math, language arts, science, ESL, career and technical education. And again, if you join, then this is where you can go first when you're starting to search for specific OERs and learn about the evaluations that other teachers who have used these resources with adult learners have found. So why participate in this public group and in the open community and in evaluating the OER? These are just a couple of reasons, and I'm really looking forward to hearing some of your comments and some of your additions to this list as we progress throughout the webinar. But one is increasing local control and allowing teachers to make instructional materials work best for them. I'm a firm believer that teachers know their students the best and that their revisions to material can only best serve their students' needs. And these legal rights of OER allows teachers to do that, and they allow teachers to easily personalize learning for our adult learners. The second is reducing cost of instructional materials. And you may or not buy materials for your students or have your students purchase books, but in the case that you do, open licenses ensure that OER can be shared easily and at very little cost. So as a program, you would have the opportunity to create your own workbooks using free and open material that have been revised or edited to suit specific levels within your program. The next one is ensuring that high quality resources are shared broadly and easily. Again, our OER Commons group is one central place. You don't need permission to join. You can join freely and share your resources with either folks who live in your state or who live across the country. And then improving the availability of quality instructional materials. OER can really improve the ability of educators to share quality and align materials that they find, or even materials that they create themselves, as we've seen with some of our user group members from this project and another project, to meet the specific needs of their classrooms. And what this also means, again, is that teachers can improve and collaborate easily on OER and benefit from the expertise of their peers. And then finally, increasing educator capacity. And this really ties back to the conversation that we had on links at the beginning of the week, is the need for professional development and increasing educator capacity. So supporting educators and teachers in using rubrics and other tools to evaluate the quality and the alignment of OER really can support reflective practice and increase capacity. And teachers who are using these skills to evaluate other materials and other high quality aligned OER can then be shared easily in this type of public group. And thereby, again, coming back to that conversation that we had, reducing the time spent searching for materials and searching for those high quality materials, because we can, again, learn from our peers and see what others are using. All right, so evaluating OER, what we're all here for. Why evaluate OER? We have a few polls that we are going to pull up on the screen and ask you to respond to, so I'll give you a moment to do that. Great, see a lot of responses coming in. About another 20 seconds, and then we'll share the results. Okay, great. We are going to close the polls now and share them with you. See, it's great. There's so many people who are already evaluating the resources that they use, and they're doing so privately. And a much smaller number is evaluating them publicly. So we'll see by the end of this webinar if some of you who are currently evaluating them privately, if you may begin to evaluate them publicly. And I don't think that this is a surprise, but in terms of what benefits you see in evaluating resources, the largest percentage of you talked about saving others and yourself time. Time is the most important. And then in terms of sharing them publicly, again, a large percentage, the largest percentage, talked about the value being saving yourself and others time from using these resources. Great. I think we can remove those polls. All right, and then one more question for you. By show of your hands, how many of you use rubrics as a regular part of your instruction? Oh, great.
Amanda's very happy.
I was going to say, my smile is really big right now. Okay, so I see many of you use rubrics. I don't see hands for all, so I just want to briefly review what a rubric is and how it's used and why it's valuable. And then we're going to jump into OER Commons. So a rubric simply lists a set of criteria which defines and describes the important components of the work being planned or evaluated. So for example, if an adult language learner is giving an oral presentation, it may be evaluated in 3 areas: content, clarity of speech, and presentation style. And then the rubric is intended to give clear guidelines to any reviewer on how to evaluate or quote-unquote grade the presentation. And since the criteria for the assessment are clearly defined in gradations from poor to excellent, different reviewers should arrive at the same conclusion or at a similar conclusion when comparing a given presentation or assignment. Which takes us right into the Achieve Rubrics. The Achieve Rubrics developed 7 rubrics in collaboration with leaders from the OER community to allow users to publicly apply them and evaluate the quality of instructional resources, specifically open resources. And they allow users to apply the rubrics in that public forum. And when they partnered with OER Commons, they developed this online tool, and it's now the tool that we're using for this project. It is specifically geared towards K through 12 because there's the connection and the alignment to the Common Core state standards. However, it can be applied to any OER. So, and we'll talk about the standards in just a moment. And we also want to mention that OER Commons added adult education as an educational level. So as you share or search for some resources, you can specifically tag it with adult education. And that's thanks to all of the user group members who contributed quite a bit to the site. There are 7 rubrics that we'll look at, and these span from opportunities of deeper learning to assessment and technological interactivity. And Tara is going to go through each of those with you in much more detail, but I just wanted to give you a sense of what the rubrics are looking at. They're going to take you directly to OER Commons so you can see the setup and what it looks like and what you will find on each page. So I'm going to just take you to my desktop. Just give me a second. Okay, so this is the home page for OER Commons. And when you come to this page, you'll log in up here. You'll see My OER, and this is where all of the evaluations that you save, evaluate, or contribute will be located. So you don't have to copy the link and create your own Word document and save those. They'll save right here within the site in your own folders as you choose. At the top, you can search for OER, and you can do this through content area or skill that you're looking to present to your class. And Connect is where you can join groups, challenges, or network hubs and contribute. So if you decide that you'd like to create your OER and share it, you have the opportunity to do that here on OER Commons. So this is what a home page for an OER will look like. When you come to this page, you'll see there is an abstract here. You'll see the author, which you can also begin to follow if you really like some people's work, the subject, the provider, the level, and the grade level. To the left here, you can see the standards that it's been aligned with. And then if you scroll down just a little bit, you'll see the Achieve rubric. So here are each of the rubrics and then the ratings. So you can see this one, 2 users have evaluated it and they gave it a score of 1. That is the average. At the bottom, here you can see the tags. So this is what, and you can see adult education there. This is what people might search for when they're searching for an OER. And you can see the license toward the bottom, and comments. And we'll talk about comments a lot when Tara goes through the evaluation piece. But here you can add your thoughts, your experiences with your students, and highlight that you used it with adult learners and the positive or the negative evaluations you provided.
Amanda, Ed Latham asked a question in the chat feature, and I think it's worth addressing. He said adult ed isn't a level, and I responded, and I just want to make sure everyone heard that response, that we asked ISKME, which designs and runs the OER Commons site, to add adult education. They did, but then we went back and said, well, actually, we need you to add ABE levels and ESL levels, and they said that they would take it under consideration for the next time that they're revising the criteria. So Ed, you're absolutely right. There should be adult ed levels. They're not all in there. For now, there's just the adult ed that at least demarcates it as an adult ed resource and helps us find it.
And just to add to that, they've been pretty responsive, so perhaps if a lot of people do find this tool valuable and do want to use it, you can contact them and share your ideas.
Absolutely.
About providing those very distinct levels. So again, this is the home page of an OER. You can see other people's ratings, the tags, and any comments that were provided. So this is just to give you an overview of what an OER will actually look like when you click on it and where you can see the evaluation results. And with that, I will turn it over, unless anyone has any questions, I will turn it over to Tara, who's going to take you through the actual rubrics.
Thank you. Okay, so for me, this is really exciting because I'm a measurement person. And so I get excited, oh, rubrics, whatever you want to call it, I get excited about it. When we started looking into evaluating OER, and we came across the Achieve Rubrics, everybody got excited. So it wasn't just me. All of a sudden, the practitioners and the educators got excited because one of the things that Achieve did with these rubrics is they really sort of honed in on the main concepts that are relevant when evaluating OER. And the truth is, for something this complex, there's going to be multiple concepts or constructs to tackle, right? And they honed in on them. But here's the thing. First of all, I forgot to change my slide. I got really excited about my we can change that slide. Here we go. Okay, sorry. Again, excited. Evaluation, yay! Okay, so some of the things we're hearing is that educators need something that's simple to use. We don't have a lot of time. These are not surprising comments, right? They're not going to be surprising to you. They're not surprising to us. And when you start looking at this, this system, the Achieve Rubrics, at first, it might seem a little bit overwhelming. It actually seems not simple. There's 7 rubrics, and you do that for each OER, and gosh, it's a lot to do. And it is at first, honestly. It is. These are complex because we want to give meaningful information to our colleagues, the other educators who are going to be considering these OER. So they're going to be somewhat complex, but as with any good measurement tool, any good rubric, it gets easier to perform the evaluation the more you do it. And some of that is because Achieve has created very good instructions, tutorials. There's great sort of criteria attached to the rating scales. And like I said, just with pure practice, it just gets easier. As you can see on the slide, there are several rubrics. We recommend completing each rubric for each OER that you use. Now, that may be simply saying NA, because as you're going to see as we go farther into this, not every rubric is going to apply for every OER, but at least giving your colleagues the information of NA can be helpful. That's obviously going to be up to you, but that's one way that to simplify the process is you don't end up putting in extensive comments or you know, having to, you know, differentiate between a 1, a 2, or 3 for each rubric. There are some choices here. I will say, and I think you probably all, especially those of you who are using rubrics, you know this as well as I do. There's no perfect tool. Okay, that doesn't exist. So what you want to strive for, and what I think to a great extent has been achieved here, is that you're looking for something that is usable, right? The ideal tool that nobody can use is not a perfect tool. So you're looking for something that is usable, and some of that comes down to the way that things are described. So let's, if there are no questions yet, let's just dive in to some of the details. So for, this is just an example. For each rubric, what you're going to see is the name of the rubric and a description. Over here, I don't know if you guys can see what I'm pointing to.
No.
No. Okay, never mind about the over here part. To the right, where there's kind of a play button, under the description it says rubric 2. That is a tutorial. I recommend for anybody using these rubrics, you watch the tutorial as many times as you need for each rubric. Certainly at least once, but you know, it's going to take a while for it all to sort of sink in, and then it becomes automatic. But make sure you take a look at that. That's one of the really helpful tools that OER Commons and Achieve have come up with in order to make these usable tools. What you're going to see for each rubric is the same scale regardless of the rubric. Now what changes are the criteria that go along with each level of that scale, right? So that's going to be different, and you're going to see that. But each rubric is going to have an NA, and don't be afraid to use this. That's going to come in handy for several of the rubrics, and we're gonna highlight which ones you tend to see that the most with. But NA really is. This just doesn't apply to the OER that I use. Okay. Then we've got a 0 to 3 actual rating scale. 0 is that the OER provided very weak or no value. 1 is that it provided limited value. 2 is that it provided strong value. And 3 is that it provided superior value. I like that gets better as your score goes up, because not all rubrics are developed that way, and this is the way I like it. So I don't know if you guys agree, but that's another point for me to be excited about. There's another piece here that we mentioned already, but I want to point out on the screen. Under the NA box, you'll see a box that has a plus and a comment, and the word comment. So that's where you can go to add your comments. So in addition to rating, you can provide comments for your colleagues, which I think are super valuable because they provide the context so that people can understand. If you've said, if you've given a certain rating, you can say, that's because I have this certain situation within my classroom. These constraints led me to this rating. If you have different constraints, that may not be the case for you. So I think those will be, that's going to provide valuable context. So what what you're going to do each time is you're going to provide a rating, you're going to save and go to the next rubric. But what we're going to do to sort of make this a little bit easier is we're going to go back to the OER Commons site and look at some, I would say, sort of semi-live. We're going to do a semi-live evaluation. Great, thank you. I got distracted for a minute, sorry, by my notes. There is one more comment I wanted to make, which is, and it's something that's come up in the links discussions, which is we really believe, I'm not sure how valuable this will be coming from me, a measurement person, but other people, I think on this webinar and in the room will probably agree, and feel free to chime in. We believe that using these rubrics, making it a part of the process for using OER is the way to create and expand your community, and to not only be helpful, it's going to be great for you, but it's going to be because you're going to be able to use other people's evaluations, but it's going to help your colleagues as well. And we think that's the key to all of this. And as we've seen, sort of the growth in understanding and interest that we talked about before, we got excited about this ball is rolling now, and maybe we're going to see more and more of that becoming automatic. You use an OER, you evaluate it. So that's just a sort of one last plug on that piece. All right, so let's dive in. So I'm going to go to Start Evaluating. You can see all of the rubrics listed here. The first one is degree of alignment to standards. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I understand that for some of you this is going to be, not as relevant. So I'm gonna have this one be one that you tackle more on your own. But I will say, overall, this is a matter of determining or delineating, perhaps, the degree to which the OER that you're evaluating at the time aligns with the standards. Usually that's Common Core State Standards, which is why we're not going to spend a lot of time there. But let me know if you have any questions about that. I know we don't have a lot of time today, and we have a lot of details, so let's dive on to the next one. All right. Excuse me, rubric 2. Quality of explanation of the subject matter. So the main idea here is that you're focusing on you truly are focusing on the subject matter. The reason I'm hesitating here is because I'm trying to decide if I should give you some time to read through this description or if I should read it to you. And I think what I'll do is I'll just read them. Try not to fall asleep, and that way we'll just be sure we're all on the same page. So what we've got here is applies to objects designed to explain subject matter. Used to rate how thoroughly subject matter is explained or otherwise revealed in the resource. Teachers might use object with whole class, small group, or individual student, and students might use the object to self-tutor. So some of the power of the rubric comes in the description. Some of the power comes from the criteria that are associated with the rating scale. So let's look at that for a minute. What you're going to do if you're in OER Commons is you're going to scroll over the number of the rating scale that you're interested in. So can they see my screen now? Did they see what I'm pointing at? Okay. So for a rating of 3, the criterion they have given is an object is rated superior for content explanation if all of the following are true. And that's kind of typical language. So, provides comprehensive information, connects the subject matter with important associated concepts, Does not need to be augmented with additional explanation or materials. Main ideas of the subject matter and the object are clearly identified for the learner. So you're going to see some thing like that for each of the, I mean, it's the same general idea for the criteria for each of the rating scales, but you know, you're going to go through and you're going to read each one very carefully, and then you're going to decide which rating you want to give, which level you're at. This is key because sometimes what we do is we see a rating scale and we want to automatically just we say, oh yeah, okay, on a scale from 1 to 3, or 0 to 3, I would give it a 1. Wait. Make sure you look at the criteria because, again, it's not just a rating scale, it's a rubric. So, you know, the criteria or anchors are pretty key. So you're going to take a look at that and determine what rating you want to give. So then, let me pause there and see if you have any questions before we move on.
So a question did just come up asking if OER Commons has a protocol or accepted practice for others to go in and modify original postings, like an example that was shared to improve it. And so what I would say is that if you identify that something is not aligned correctly, you can go in and add your own evaluation and align it to the particular standard that you believe it should be aligned to. And here's really where the comment box will come in, and you can add the comment, but you cannot go in and change someone else's rating. You can go in and add an additional rating with comments to kind of balance that review.
In that case, Amanda, this is Dahlia speaking. Would it be appropriate to contact the librarian, the curator for OER Commons, to let them know that you think that there's an error and let them sort it out? Or is that too much?
I think you certainly could, and they are very responsive to people, but I think it's too much in the sense of that's what the rubrics are there for.
Yeah, okay.
So if object A is rated aligned to standard C, and you say, oh no, it's not aligned to standard C, then what you're doing is you're scoring it with a 0 or a 1. So you're saying, hey, as an educator, I'm saying that this is very weakly aligned. I don't see that. And you can, again, add in your own standards, and you can also add in your own comment to provide some explanation.
Thank you.
That's a great point because what the end user ends up seeing is the average of the rating. So you will be affecting people's opinions, but yeah, as far as you're willing to take that, right?
Yeah, and again, this is that whole point of connecting to the larger community and saving time. So if you see that it's misaligned, you can add that comment. So someone who is looking for a specific resource that is aligned to that standard will say, based on the previous evaluation and comment, I see that this may not be the best resource for me.
Yeah, the comment is key there, and I think Ed, jumped in again and said, well, we don't want the other people to get confused or frustrated, if we leave this in there, which I think is a great point, which is why, if you can reach out to the curators and say, but certainly at the very least, the comments would be key.
And the more evaluations, the better, because then it was going to say, hey, this is in fact not aligned. The alignment is either very weak or limited.
Evaluate.
Great questions, thank you.
So before we move on, I just want to point out, so this is really about the student's experience, right? So the how accessible this is to the students. So then we're going to move on to the utility of materials designed to support teaching. This is about the teacher. So again, let's look at the description together. Applies to objects designed to support teachers in planning or presenting subject matter. So that's why we're saying that's, the teacher is the focus here. primary user would be a teacher, evaluates the potential utility of an object for the majority of instructors at the intended grade level. I'll give you a minute to sort of think about that. And then let's look at the rating scale and the anchors associated with it. So to get a 3, we're going to ask ourselves, again, were the materials comprehensive? Were they easy to understand? Did the OER provide suggestions for use with a variety of learners? So we know that this is important, right? The element here is that you're accounting for variability in your students' levels. Did the OER function as intended? Pretty important. And for larger objects, did the materials facilitate mixed instructional approaches? And you know, what we think they're driving at here is, as educators, we try to tackle things in various ways, right? You want to, some things you want to do, sort of a mixture of like group or independent instruction. You don't want to just pick one thing and go with it. If you can mix it up, and some that allows you to sort of address different levels within your students and their learning styles. So those are pretty important pieces. I'm pausing because it's, to me, a lot of information to sort of take in all at once. Let's see if there are any questions or comments about this rubric. Are there things, just thinking about materials designed to support teaching, are there things missing here that you may, for example, want to add into the comments, or are there questions you have about the rating scale anchors or criteria?
So we do have some people typing, so I'll watch it.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, all right, so I think we're getting some good comments. Nothing major that I need to address, so let's keep moving on.
Can I jump in? We
Oh,
have
absolutely.
one comment that asked about, is there any way to point out how well the students liked the material and how engaged they were with the material? And I think that's a super question. And the spot where you can do this, for sure, is in the comment section. So you might find a resource, an OER, use it, and then come back to the site and evaluate it. And I encourage you to add in the comment sections, and you can do that either overall on the home page or under each individual rubric, and you can add in your comments about student engagement with the material. So thank you, Dorothea, that was a great question.
Okay, I think we're starting to see sort of the process, and it continues on this way, which is part of why it becomes a little bit more automatic. So we're going to probably pick up a pace of it here. And I think they become a little bit easier, frankly. So quality of assessments applies to objects designed to determine what a student knows before, during, or after a topic is taught. When many assessments are included in one object, the rubric is applied to the entire set. That's a key point. So if you've got one assessment, you're evaluating it. If you've got more than one, you're evaluating the whole set. I mentioned that we were going to point out some of the rubrics where we tend to see NA used a lot. This is one of them. If there is no assessment associated with your OER, then you're not going to use 0, 1, 2, or 3. You're going to use the NA. But there's some key concepts here. Again, key kind of measurement concepts that most or all of you are going to be really familiar with. When we're assessing something, right, we only want to assess what we've taught. We want to make sure that we're not throwing in something extra, that we're not making this difficult for reasons that are not associated with the content at all. We want to make sure that the weighting is right, so that if you have a minor point in your lesson, but the assessment is almost entirely about that one minor point, then that's not weighted properly. So these are key measurement things to always keep in mind.
Can I jump in with a comment?
Absolutely.
So there's a question here about the lack of assessment being a serious omission, especially with a lesson or activity. And I think the one thing that we have to keep in mind is that OER can come in the form of a full lesson plan, a full curriculum, or a single activity or a single explanation. So we have to think about what the purpose or the intent of the creator was. So if the intent was to provide a full spectrum in the sense of, we're going to start with our explanation and background knowledge and go all the way to an assessment, and then suddenly you don't see one. Yes, in fact, that is a problem, and that's one thing. But if it's, say a video or a game where the intention was not to provide a full assessment at the end, that is okay.
That's a great reminder too, that when you're thinking about the rating, no matter which rubric you're looking at, consider the intent of the OER. And perhaps as a philosophical comment, you think they should just always be including assessments, but that probably is a discussion for another time. Call me, we'll talk about it. All right. And some really good comments and ideas that you guys are sharing. Wonderful. Okay. Let's look at rubric 5, quality of technological interactivity. This is straightforward once you really read it, but it does trip people up at first. This is not a question of the technology itself. This is a question of the interactivity. So it applies to objects that have a technology-based interactive component used to rate the degree and quality of an object's interactivity. You see they're really throwing that word in there quite a bit. Interactivity broadly means that the object responds to the user. The object behaves differently based on what the user does. This is not a rating for technology in general, but for technological interactivity. Yeah, we're sort of driving that point home. I get that. But honestly, it tripped us up at first, so we wanted to make sure that we really pointed that out. Some of the things you're going to think about when you're choosing your ratings are here on the screen. Is the interactivity, is it responsive to student input in a way that creates an individualized learning experience, and so forth. This is one where we also get a lot of NAs, because there's going to be a lot of OER out there that just don't have this component to it. That's okay. All right, let me scroll down. There we go. Make sure that you're jumping in if you have any questions. I know I'm starting to move a little faster. Otherwise, let's talk about rubric 6. Quality of instructional practice, instructional and practice exercises. So here we're driving at the exercises that are meant to help, create and build on and strengthen skills. We want them to become routine through practice and that sort of thing, right? We know that as educators. So this is, I think, a pretty critical rubric. I'm really pleased that they included it. We've got more here in the description. When concepts and skills are introduced, providing a sufficient number of exercises to support skill acquisition is critical. However, when integrating skills in complex tasks, as few as one or two may be sufficient. group of practice exercises is treated as a single object with the rubric applied to the entire set, just like we said with the assessment one. So again, there's these criteria, and there's several things to be considering. This object is rated superior if all of the following is true on this rubric. Offers more exercises than needed for the average student to support mastery of targeted skills. Exercises are clearly written and supported by accurate answer keys, scoring guides. And there are a variety of exercise types and or formats. So what we've done is we've gone from the explanation of the subject matter. We've had the support for the teachers. Are there assessments? What's the interactivity like? Practice for developing skills, which is great. And then we move on to opportunities for deeper learning, which also I think comes close to most of our hearts, because we often are striving for we want to strive for this, right? We don't want just surface rote memorization. I'm hearing, yeah. So let's talk a little bit about this rubric. It applies to objects that engage learners too, and there's a list here. Think critically and solve complex problems. Reason abstractly. Work collaboratively. Learn how to learn. Communicate effectively. Construct viable arguments and critique the reasoning of others. Apply discrete knowledge and skills to real-world situations. Construct, use, or analyze models. Some of these are, more complex than others, but it's pretty interesting to see this applied here. I think that this is not an easy rubric to use, but I think it's an important one. It's probably one where we're going to see a lot of comments, because context really matters on this. So let's just quickly look at the rating scale. For a 3, the object is rated superior when all the following are true. 3 or more of the deeper learning skills identified in this rubric are required. So that list that I read to you from the description, that's where it's saying 3 or more. 3 or more of those things, okay, plus a range of cognitive demand appropriate to and supportive of material targeted and are offered. That's a kind of hard one to read, sorry. I might rephrase that. Appropriate scaffolding and direction are provided. So I think for this one in particular, it's interesting to look at some of the other points of the rating scale. So 2, an object is rated strong if it contains 1 or 2 deeper learning skills identified in this rubric, such as an object that involves a complex problem that requires abstract reasoning skills to reach a solution. So here, it's 1 or 2 of the things listed above. If you're going to give an OER a limited rating, a rating of 1, you're saying it includes 1 deeper learning skill, but is missing clear guidance. So the reason I think that's important to take a look at is because 3 is saying 3 or more of the things listed, plus these other 2 things. Okay. So with that said, let's see. I know that people have been monitoring whether people have had comments or questions.
One more question about sorting by rubric scores. Oh, you answered already.
I did, yeah. Unfortunately, you can't.
Okay. We have made it through all of the rubrics. Quickly, nonetheless, all of them. I want to reiterate, these are complex, and if you're the type of person who tends to skip instructions, or say you get a survey sent your way and you're like, hey, yeah, I know, and you skip to the questions, remember that about yourself when you're doing these evaluations, and stop and take the time to watch a tutorial, read the description, read each anchor or criterion before you choose your rating. Because, and that's okay, it's just a matter of knowing ourselves, right? If you're somebody who sort of focuses on every word, okay, fine. But if you know that you're somebody who sort of skips through, like, yeah, stop and back up. Because at first, you're going to really want to do that because you want these to be meaningful. And beyond that, we want people to start to use these rating scales as consistently as possible without having come together and had some major discussions about, what the ratings mean. That's why you have the criteria here. They start to create the consistency, but if you disregard them, then we're gonna lose that, right? All right. Any other questions coming through?
There's one about Bloom's taxonomy, and talking about how create, which is on the top of the pile in the revised taxonomy, is not necessarily addressed in these deeper learning opportunities.
Okay, that's a good point. And it feels like, again, there certainly, you're right, it's implied. And, some of these, like we said, at the beginning, there's no perfect tool. So if there are pieces that you feel aren't popping out the way they should, then that is a nice time to make sure you're using the comment section. And sometimes, maybe it's there and you just missed it, or you're thinking about it slightly differently. We know that that's going to happen. We just want people to start, reading through these and being as careful as possible, so we start creating a community of users and evaluators. And we've got a little bit more coming, but perhaps we want to move on, and then as the comments and questions start keep coming through, then we can address them if necessary.
Sounds good.
All right, thank you all.
Thanks, Tara. And I just want to point out that after you've completed all of the rubrics, you want to click Save and View Results. Now, we didn't respond to any of these because we didn't use it, and we don't want to just add in an evaluation for the sake of the webinar, but we want to show you that it's really important that you click Save, Save and Review, and then here you'll see a review of all of your scores, and then you have to click Finalize OER Review for others to be able to see your comments and for your rubric scores to be averaged in with the other rubric scores. So I'm just going to say go back because I don't actually want to do that. Click X. And then what happens after you've completed your evaluation, then you'll be able to find your resources under My OER. So you can see these are some of mine, but everything that you evaluate will be saved here for you. So now I'd like to go back to the PowerPoint. There we go. And just give a very brief summary of where we've been. So we've talked about the Achieve Rubrics and how while all of the rubrics may not apply to your specific resource, you can still rate them by selecting NA, just so that future users know not to expect either an assessment or an explanation or technological interactivity for that particular resource. We really encourage you to add comments and tag for adult education. And at the beginning of the webinar, we talked a bit about the different levels. What is exactly adult education? And here, there's kind of no constraints. You can type in beginning literacy ESL adult. You can type in high intermediate ABE adult. Whatever language that you feel is most appropriate for that resource, you can add the tag. and then sharing with other users, and we can do that through OER Commons by saving our resources and joining the public group. And that these Achieve Rubrics can really help us learn from others' experiences. And as a couple of you have pointed out in the chat, it can really also help us to reflect on our own experiences and our own practices. So now we want to open it up again to you. You've been typing in as we go along, which is great, but do you have any additional questions about the rubrics and how to use them? And I'm just going to give a few minutes because I do see some people typing, so I just want to give them a chance.
And there is one that came in. Can a user subscribe to a resource to catch any new comments on that resource automatically?
And I don't believe you can do anything like that. What I've seen is that you can click on an author's name. So if Dahlia is a frequent contributor to OER Commons and I really like her stuff, I might just click on one that I've already evaluated, and then a list of hers will come up. But I've not seen anything where you can subscribe to a particular resource and get any type of updates. And that's actually something that I've perceived as being nice about OER Commons, is that I don't get a lot of emails, I don't get any updates from them. But as I've said a couple of times, feel free to reach out to the librarians and they may.
But as Amanda's noted, either you can add them to the group if you think it's a valuable resource, and so that now it's been semi-curated or additionally curated. And you can also, if you've evaluated it, it becomes part of your profile, and then you'll have an easy way to find it again. That's a great question.
Did you see, Eric had a comment about some of the efforts that they've been implementing for evaluation, and sort of lamenting not having known more about these. But I just applaud the fact that you're getting started, and that's a key, right? You start somewhere and then you build out. I mean, that's what we did too. We started somewhere. We started collecting sort of a list of concepts that we thought would be important to cover, and we just started down that road. There's no perfect path, but now knowing's half the battle, right? If anybody's from my generation, now you know, but knowing's half the battle.
And Dorothea had a comment about, are there any requirements that the resources be evaluated by those with more expertise in a topic? And the answer is no. Anyone can go in and provide an evaluation for a resource. And I think while that may be a con in terms of using this evaluation tool, there's also the ability to use the comments. And if you are an expert in X, you can always add a comment explaining why maybe you see an issue with some of the other evaluations and why, and giving other users that opportunity to learn from your expertise without meeting you.
And that actually came up on the links conversation, and I think it was Ed and I agreed that it's kind of like we have the same style when we approach Amazon. You look at what are the overall ratings, and then you go to find all the negative ratings. You find out what the negative comments were and if they matter to you. So my comment on that is the more evaluations we have on a particular resource, the larger the pool. So having 100 people evaluate something and the majority give it a 3 in quality tells me a lot more than 3 people evaluating it and giving it a 1.5. Or that's actually not a number that would come out, but
No, that makes perfect sense.
There's a comment. This is a great suggestion about a scavenger hunt around adult education OER.
And I think that Ed, you should create that and add it to OER Commons. That'd be wonderful.
Comment for people who can't see the chat.
Oh, can people not see the chat? Ed had just suggested a scavenger hunt around OER Commons for the tools. Eric. Oh, Eric, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and Eric, once you create it, which you just so graciously volunteered, you can upload it to OER Commons and share it with everyone. Great, these are some great questions and comments. So we do want to just, as you know, the comments are coming in, we'll continue to address them. But I do want to kind of go back to the beginning and take a look at, you know, what you see, knowing what you know now. What are the pros and cons of evaluating OER in this forum? So if we can pull up the polls for that, that would be great. Thank you. So you'll see two boxes on your screen, one for pro and one for con. And we want you to respond. So now that you know what information the Achieve Rubrics can provide you if completed, what are your thoughts about the pros and cons of evaluating OER using this tool? And just while you all are typing, and pro and con is we want to hear both. There is a question about is there a date that gives you any idea of how current the material is? And on that home page, I've not seen a date, but some people will date their material. So once you view the resource, you know, if it's in a Word document or a PDF, it might have a header or footer that indicates the date. So just to remind you as you're completing these polls, I'd like to know, now that you know what information the Achieve Rubrics can provide you, if you complete them, what are your thoughts about the pros and cons of evaluating OER using this tool?
I'd like to actually, as we're waiting, address Linda Church's comment. Are there plans for other activities to roll this out to adult educators? There is another, this project, as I mentioned, is ending at the end of June. However, we have created online courses on using OER for math and science instruction. Those courses will be available to teachers. I mentioned this at the beginning of the webinar that this will be, they will live in the Links Learning Portal, and the RPDCs and states will be announcing access to this training according to Octave. There is another project, I believe Amanda works on that project, and they're developing OER for English as a second language. After that, I don't know, but I do know that I cannot speak on behalf of Octave, but they have shown so far a great interest in providing professional development around OER. So I certainly hope that that will continue into the future. I added a comment in the chat feature though that I really think this will become a state push, very much like Eric is talking about in New York. I think states and work groups within states, led by teachers and led by the state offices or professional developers, who will really push the use of OER forward. That's my prediction.
And I think too, it has to, I mean, a lot of people, so many more people know what OER are now than they did 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And I see a lot of positive comments coming up on the chat pod. There's quite a few of you online, quite a few of you participated in the discussion. So I think if you as a program administrator or you as a teacher or you as a professional developer see the value, it's up to you to keep this going and keep it moving forward and sharing. Great, so there's been a lot of really wonderful responses coming through on the chat, and some of the pros are that it's, you know, very thorough. The ability to comment allows teachers to, users of the OER to really speak to one another and share additionally. Some of the cons that are coming through are really focused again on time, and I think Tara mentioned this at the beginning, is that it absolutely will take you time at the beginning. I often think back to when I first started teaching and writing lesson plans, and it would take me hours and hours and hours to come up with the, you know, the perfect opening activity, and now I can do it in a much more reasonable amount of time.
And there's comments that it's subjective, which I agree with, absolutely. It is, I mean, it's going to be. There, I don't know how they would have it not be, but the criteria help with that. And like we've been saying, the more people who rate, the less that becomes an issue. But one benefit I was thinking of when I was reading the answers is it may get OER developers considering these the rubrics as they're developing. You know, so they may be already, as they're developing, keeping in mind, hey, is this easy to use? Is it comprehensive? You know, that would be really great if people are thinking about it sort of ahead of time too.
Thank you. So I think we will keep these polls and think about them.
Yes.
As we move forward, but I'd like to go back to the presentation, as we have 8 minutes to wrap up, and we want to share a few things with you. And in order to do that, I'm going to pass that to Dahlia.
Okay, great. So what's next? I mentioned in the beginning that we'll be ending the project, but we are really interested. Personally, we've enjoyed the project so much that we would like to find ways to continue to do this work with the field. And we're thinking about how we can do that. So I hope that all of you will keep us in mind. I will be checking out some of the resources that you all have shared, including Eric in New York. Wonderful. And the earlier resources that were shared. There are a few things that you can do, or we encourage you to do. One of them is to join the Adult Education Open Community of Resources on OER Commons. Even if you're participating in other repositories, I still think it's very worthwhile to participate in this group and to share what you're evaluating, and it's also a great site for uploading. And I've made this comment elsewhere. We're not promoting OER Commons. They didn't pay us to promote them, and we're not suggesting that that's the superior and best site out there. The reason we chose to align with OER Commons for the project is because of the Achieve Rubrics, and that was really the key. Tara did a lot of background searching, research, and development, and came up with some very fine criteria that aligned almost entirely with the Achieve Rubrics. The only thing missing was whether or not it's appropriate for the adult learner, and that was why we asked ISKME to add the tag for adult ed. And of course, we'd like them to do more, and we'll keep asking. We encourage you all to keep asking as well. So 5 years from now, who knows what folks will be using, but right now, this is the resource that we found that seemed to work the best. We also encourage you to evaluate an OER that's been uploaded by someone in the adult ed community. Continue to multiply evaluate items that are appropriate for the adult learner to continue add to the focus on those objects. Also tell a friend, tell a colleague, tell other teachers. Share this information in your professional development circles, at your state conferences. We really encourage you to let other folks know about this.
And can you just, the Achieve has wonderful resources. If you just search Achieve Rubrics, there's plenty of resources there that you can then share with your colleagues if you don't feel comfortable kind of talking off the cuff or going through it as we just did. at this point. So there are materials available to you that you can certainly share with them.
And explore the resources on your handout. So there was a handout sent in advance. Great, okay.
After.
So afterwards, we will send you a handout, and we'll have resources for you to consider. I also see that on the chat feature, there's this real, a very valuable discussion, I won't call it controversy, but it's about the value of having experts to evaluate a resource versus having this sort of critical mass, Eric used a better term, crowdsourcing, like an Amazon or a TripAdvisor kind of thing, where you just get enough people to comment so you get an overall feel for something. There's value to both of those. I don't think we should lose both of those, and I think actually the links site has this resource collection that's evaluated by, experts, but there's also room for comment from the field on the tools that are available. So I think both are valuable. So thank you all for your comments. So Amanda also shared this in the chat feature, but here's the link to joining the group. All you have to do is click on join this group and get started. Now you do have to register to have an account with OER Commons, but that is free and simple.
Name and email.
Name and email.
And they've never sent me an email.
Oh, isn't that what I either? So name and email, that's all. One more password to have to remember. That's all. That's the big challenge. Okay. And I will let Amanda talk about this, but our colleague Delphina Brown, who's Deputy Project Director on this OER STEM project, created this WordPress site. I wonder, Delphina, actually, if you would spend 2 minutes or less talking about it.
Hi, everyone. So on the screen is actually a screenshot of our MOOC on open educational resources, and we launched this at the recent COAPE conference around the 4 sessions we did on open educational resources. And at COAPE, we shared some of what we've talked about today and a lot more about what we've learned about OER as a result of this project. So because the project is ending, we wanted to put this in some place a little bit more permanent where everyone else in the field can continue to access these resources about open educational resources and continue to discuss OER. So if you visit this site, which is a WordPress site, you'll find that there are 4 topics right now. We may add to this depending on what other areas we go into around OER, but the topics describe OER, talk a little bit about how you can start looking for OER and integrating them into your lessons, and a bit about open courses that are created with open educational resources. So I mentioned earlier, this is a MOOC. This space itself is an open course, so it's free for anyone to use. Most of the, I think actually all the resources here are free for you to share with others if you want to repurpose them or redistribute them through your networks. But we're asking everyone to go on, check out what's there, tweet about it, blog about it, post something on Facebook, and use the hashtag OpenAE to start a discussion about open education trending in our field.
Great, and would you mind adding the URL to the chat?
I did. Oh, you did?
Super, thanks. Thank you, Dale. So if you're interested in learning more, you can look for updates. I mentioned this already, the OER STEM Online PD courses. We have Open Your Classroom with OER, Open Math, Open Resources, Engaging Adult Learners for 21st Century Skills, and again, Open Science, Open Resources. And just to share a quote from David Wiley, I called him the godfather of open pedagogy. He even Googled David Wiley and find his blog site. He's quite eloquent and loquacious about open pedagogy. And he says that education is inherently an enterprise of openness and sharing and generosity. And so we leave you with this quote and this thought as you continue to do your great work in the field. And of course you can contact us. Here's my email address and Amanda Duffy's as well. We thank you for joining us. Please do complete the webinar evaluation form. Links will provide us with the feedback, and they will also provide the feedback to Octave, our client. So it will be great to hear your input. It helps us to improve our presentations for the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.